What will you fast from this Lent? How about fasting from worry? Fasting from busy? Fasting from hectic? What if you use this time to embrace an intentional, unhurried pace? I'm Pastor Sue Coller, and in today's After the Sermon interview, we're going to explore some of these things from our Ash Wednesday worship service.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Nancy.
Thank you for kind of being so light on your feet and switching the Ash Wednesday service yesterday to a virtual service. How was that for you?
Well, it was a little bit of scrambling there at the last minute for both myself and Carrie, our church administrator, because she had to figure out how to do a live stream away from our camera system here. But she figured that out, and we made some tweaks to the service. Unfortunately, we had to cut all the music. There was just no way to bring the choir into my home to to provide that. But overall, it went really well, and it was the right thing to do. We didn't want our folks getting out on those roads and sliding and having accidents. So disappointing, but the right thing to do. So yeah, we managed, and it was all good, and had good conversation online.
Good, good. Well, let's dig into that a little bit. What is Lent? What's the meaning of Lent?
And of course, Ash Wednesday is the beginning of the Lent season, which goes all the way to Easter. It's something that goes back to the very early days of the church. Lent originally was when new converts spent a time of study and preparation for their baptism. And baptisms at that time were only held on the Easter Vigil, the Saturday night, right before Easter Sunday. And so traditionally they would take 3 days and have kind of a crash course in what it really meant to follow Jesus and what his death meant for us. And then they'd be baptized. And over the years, the church has kind of extended that. And to make a long story short, they've turned it into a 40-day time period before Easter. But here's the interesting thing, not counting Sundays. Every Sunday is supposed to be a little Easter. So every Sunday we celebrate Christ's resurrection. Every Sunday we celebrate the good news. But Lent kind of turned into this time of focusing on what Christ's life, death, and resurrection means for us as individuals. And so this year, as we're looking at Lent in our church, we're doing a series called, I'm calling it Stop and Breathe. It's all about connecting with God, and to really focus on, again, our relationship with God through Christ. And what does that mean for us, and how does that help us live? So that's what Lent is about.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that background. So in your sermon yesterday, you kind of invited us to put down our busyness. So I want to explore that a little bit, because in some ways we're addicted to being busy, right? It's like, how are you? I'm busy. Like, that's a badge of honor, I think, is what you said. So
Yes.
let's just explore that, because I'd like to understand from you. It's like, first of all, how did we get to kind of this addiction of busyness? And then what's its impact in our relationship to God?
Yeah, I have to say, I honestly don't know how we got to this addiction, but addiction is a really good word. And I'm as addicted as anybody else. For me, a lot of it came from, growing up, working in a profession where women were not valued for so long. It's like I have to prove my worth. So I have to work twice as hard as everybody else. And the church has changed to the point that we don't have to do that. But I've had 30 years of doing that, and it's hard to stop that. And so I think for some of us, it's come about because we've been put in positions where we felt we needed to prove our value and our worth. And how do we do that in today's society? It's by being better than everybody else. It's by producing more than everybody else. It's by working longer than everybody else. And so I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's the whole thing. just in general, our world seems to be, I shouldn't say our world, our American culture seems to really say, if you're not earning your keep, you aren't of any value. And so we kind of we adopt that and we put that on ourselves when we shouldn't. So yeah, it's become almost a badge of honor. And I've certainly noticed in the past several years, as both of us, I ask people how they're doing, and as they ask me, that the word busy comes out more and more and more, and to the point where it almost feels like if my answer isn't busy, we feel like a slacker, or like we're really not doing what we should be doing, or we feel guilty because someone else is doing so much and we aren't. And yeah, it's been a weird dynamic, but it has consumed our lives. High schoolers too. We got some high schoolers in our church that they're at church at 6:30 in the morning and they aren't getting home until 9 o'clock at night, 4 out of 5 school nights a week, because of all their extracurricular activities. And colleges have said, we want to see all those extracurricular activities before we let you in. And so we're teaching our kids that they can't just be kids. They can't just play.
I do a lot of work with Finland, and Finland, on the heels of World War II, they made well-being their number one strategy as a country because they felt that that's the only way they would maintain their independence from
Mhm.
Russia. And in the context of
Mhm.
current war, that's really interesting, right? But it
Yes.
was interesting because we had the opportunity to work with the head of education. I'm like, well, how does this show up? How does well-being show up in your decisions? And they said, well, it took us a few years, but now it's down to this. Every decision we make, we ask ourselves, how will it impact the children? I mean,
Mhm.
that is profound from a strategy perspective, right?
Yes.
And how that shows up is every student in every classroom, K through 12, gets 2 healthy meals a day. You don't have to sign up for the
Mhm.
food program, right? No shame, no get
Mhm.
your parents to sign something. Every child, every day, 2 healthy meals, right? They also don't do homework. They think play is the way you actually integrate what you're learning in school into your life experience.
And
So
studies have shown
I don't
that.
think they
Yeah.
start doing homework until maybe senior high or college,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I just wanted to reinforce that, what you're suggesting, some countries like Finland have really taken that to heart.
One of the interesting things as I was doing the research for yesterday's message was to look at work hours of the United States compared to other countries. And we work way more, like 2 to 300 hours more than most of the other, what we would call first world countries. Most, I guess I shouldn't say most, but some other first world countries are really leaning towards fewer hours a day and fewer work days a week. And we seem to be going in exactly the opposite direction.
Mhm.
And we pay a price for that. One of the questions I asked in my meditation, my message yesterday was, what's the cost of our busyness?
Yeah.
And it's huge. It costs us in our relationship with our spouses and our families. It costs us in our relationship with our friends. It costs us, and sometimes to a degree, our sanity, because we don't have time to stop and process things and really think through things. And of course, it costs us in our relationship with God. And when you think about it, a lot of that is because if we're so busy, we don't have time. We aren't taking the time, we aren't setting aside the time to nurture those things that give us life.
So
We
why is it that it's important to kind of be quiet or still or pause in order to connect with God? Why can't God just be with me on my my busyness?
Well, God is with you in your busyness, but we don't always notice that because we're busy. We aren't paying attention to a lot of what's going on around us. We aren't paying attention to what God is doing around us or in us. So I think of that pause in terms of what happens to our muscles when we exercise. We often think that I need to build muscle. Let me go, do all these push-ups and do all these reps and run all these miles. But the muscle building actually happens in the pauses between those things. And that's the same way for our relationships with people. It's in the pauses that those things build and grow and become strong. So yes, God is with us all the time. And I kind of have a running conversation with God throughout the day, even in my busyness. But if I really want that relationship to be strong and to grow deeper and to have even more of an impact in shaping my life, then I need to step back from my busyness and focus on being present with God. God's present with me. I'm not always present
Mm,
with
now
God.
that's interesting. How can you describe what that difference is like? Like, how does it feel to you when God is present with you, but you're not present with God? What's that? Can you describe that?
Part of it is that I don't notice God all the time because I'm so busy, because I'm not present with God. And so I'm not always conscious of what God might be trying to tell me, of the nudges that are coming my way. Um, so yeah, so part of it is that when I'm not present with God, I'm missing a lot.
Mm.
Logically and in my heart, I know God is with me, and that gives me strength and comfort and courage and all that I need to make it through the day. But the difference between that and me being present with God is I'm then allowing my relationship with God to shape how I spend the next minute. So if I pause for this minute and say, I'm just going to pay attention to what God might be saying to me right now, that's probably going to change what I do in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or the next conversation I have, versus if I were just barreling straight ahead without pausing and without thinking, without asking, that inner voice of the spirit inside me of, uh, God, what's going on here? And what wisdom do you have for me?
So, Sue, could we do that right now? Would you hold space for you and I to do that?
Sure, we can do that. And so, conscious of the fact that some people will be listening to this on podcasts, so silence is not always a helpful thing on a podcast. Although I highly recommend, if you really want to spend some time connecting and being present with God, silence is really good. Stop all the other noise that's going on around us so we can listen to God and pay attention. But let me just ask you, and for anybody else who's listening right now, think about just the last hour of your day, last hour, whatever you were doing before this moment, and ask yourself, where was God in that hour? Yeah, so where was God in this last hour? Again, conscious of silence, I'm going to lead you through the process now, but
Mhm. Yeah, no, I love this. So
yeah, and
I was just I'm living in a snow globe right now because I'm in Minnesota. Um, but everything is Zoom and phone and online, whatnot. But I was just in a conversation with a colleague, and we were going to have lunch together, but that didn't happen. So we had a Zoom conversation, and I was really pleased with myself that I made a conscious decision to communicate more from my heart than my head. Because believe me, I had a lot of ideas. So did he. But that wasn't what the conversation needed to be about. It was more about us connecting kind of heart to heart exploring kind of where some alignment is and what brings us joy and
Mhm.
moving forward from that. So that would be, yeah, I think that's how God showed up for me in the last hour.
And so my next question for you then is, what is the wisdom that God revealed to you in that hour?
I love this. And this gentleman and I, we both arrived to it. It's like, let's just trust the journey. And let's just, because we both basically agreed, we're both meeting and greeting a lot of people throughout the week.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
both agreed that we're going to introduce people we meet to each other.
Okay,
Right.
cool.
And so then we said, let's sit like every 2 weeks, let's just spend 30 minutes and like, who'd you meet? Who's interesting? Who? Right. And it was interesting because we don't have a goal, we don't have a strategy, we're not trying to, whatever it is.
Mhm.
We just said, let's just trust the process that the right people will show up that are kind of like-minded and like-hearted, and fabulous things will emerge from that. Like we didn't have to have a big agenda or plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some wonderful wisdom that I think we sometimes forget, is we often think we have to have a big agenda. But being present opens up doors that we may not have anticipated and may lead to new nudges to go through some doors instead of others. And so then my next question for you would be, and just think in terms of, I love the, triad. So, how did God show up in this last hour? What is the wisdom God revealed to you in that hour? My third question is in light of that, how will you spend your next hour? What might be different in your next hour because of what you learned in the past hour from God's wisdom?
Mm. I love these 3 questions you're asking, Sue. I just love this. How am I? Oh, wow. Um,
And it's okay if you don't have an answer right away.
I think just trust. Like I'm working on a proposal for a client, and I've been working on it for like 3 weeks, which is unusual, but the challenge is unusual. And I started. First, of course, I got the text from the client. It's like, hey, any chance I can get that today? I'm like, yes. And I've been working on it, and really what has come to me is, Nancy, what you're putting together is good enough. Like, really,
Okay.
I've been meditating on this and doing research for 2 weeks. So like, it's good enough. It's what we call a wicked problem. There's no answer anyway,
Yep.
right? Just, it's good enough, right? Give them something to respond to. And so I think that's the gift of the last hour with my friend and colleague. Like, I don't have to have the answer. I don't even have to have a plan, and it's okay.
So part of being present with God is noticing and paying attention, but also it's allowing that noticing and paying attention to change how you walk through the world. So you could walk through the world differently, in a more healthy way, in a more connected way. So when we talk about stepping away from our busyness and embracing time with God, we're expressing a desire to be in the world differently than we are. It doesn't mean how we're in the world right now is bad, but is there room for us to find greater peace or greater connection? Or is there a way for us to have, I don't like the word balance because I don't think everyone really achieves balance in their lives. We have moments when we do better and not better, but integration, uh, is, can we from our relationship and spending time with God find greater ways to integrate the various pieces of our lives so that they become a healthy whole that celebrates life, as opposed to that rat race that just burns us out. And in the end, you talk to someone at the end of their life, very few people are going to say, boy, I wish I worked more. They're going to say, I wish I spent more time with my parents or my children or my friend. Or usually that's what I hear from people near their deathbed. It's like, that's what they wish for.
Mhm.
And that means, again, taking time and taking
Mhm.
time with God.
Mhm. Well, and Sue, I just love that, though, the kind of the three-step process you just shared with me and others, and I thank you for that. I'm gonna start integrating that. What other tips do you have for us? How do we unplug?
Well, some of it's quite literally put down your phone. Stop looking at it. Every once in a while, I take off for the office and left the phone sitting on my desk at home or something. And sometimes I do have to call Linda and say, I don't have time to run home. Can you run it out to me? Because that's how a lot of people communicate with me, is through text. And very few people call me at the office. They call me on my cell phone. But there are other times where I say, no, I'm going to leave it there. And if someone really needs to reach me, I have email on my computer at the office, or they could try the church, call the church number and see if I'm here. And it really is kind of freeing sometimes. We didn't always used to be connected 24/7. And I think getting back to that a little bit would be healthy. It's interesting. Some of our younger generation is realizing that themselves. And I run into more and more people in their 20s and 30s who are not living on their phones. I think I live on my phone a lot more than some of they do. And I think they're tapping into some wisdom there.
Mhm.
So literally unplug, put down the phone, stop sitting in front of the TV for all those hours, or even just having it on in the background. Take a walk. If you have a busy schedule, schedule in a half hour where you're just going to go outside, maybe not in Minnesota right now, unless you got the right clothes for it. But go outside and take a half hour walk and just notice what's around you, and ask that question, where is God on this walk with me?
Mhm.
Take some time to meditate every day, even just a couple minutes makes a difference. And especially if you do it at the morning, at the beginning of your day, it does impact the way you enter the rest of the day. So just simple things that when we're busy, we find very hard to schedule in. So um, schedule it in, write it on your calendar if you have to.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Any other wisdom for us during this Lent season that you'd like to share?
I do think mostly find ways to connect with God and connect with others. Um, I personally think that there's something to be said for church, being a church pastor, but I was talking to somebody the other day who admitted that, church, the religious stuff of church really isn't for her, but she's a better person because she goes. And part of it is a connection with the people. And part of it, I think, is making that hour a pause out of the rest of her day. So that would be some other advice. Even if you aren't a church going person, find a church to go to during this Lent season, all the way up through Easter, and just be present and notice what that is like for you. So just find ways to be present with yourself as well. Pay attention to how you're feeling. And if you're feeling harried and hectic and tired, well, I think that's maybe God trying to tell you, stop, take a breath, maybe ask yourself what's really that important to be doing right now, what is yours to do, and what is not.
Mm. Sue, thank you so much. You put things in just such wonderful perspective, but also practical ways to apply. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And yes, if our faith doesn't lead itself to practical things to do, then that's not much value.
Yeah.
This has been great. I love these conversations. So our whole worship series this Lent season is on how to stop and breathe. And so I'm looking forward to getting into more detail on some of the other topics for this season.
I do too.
Yeah.
More to come.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And everybody else, catch us on our next podcast. Thanks for joining us at First Presbyterian Church, where faith is nurtured, curiosity encouraged, diversity welcomed, and all are loved. Find out more about us at fpclincoln.org.